The lesson plans included below are meant to take 1 week or 5 class periods to complete, but you can pick and choose individual lessons to use as well. These lessons can also easily be expanded if you want to spend more time on Fred Hampton, or if students get particularly interested in some part of this history. As I mentioned in the other video, the goal of these lessons is to center the life and work of Fred Hampton and not focus solely on his death. The first lesson uses Google Slides to provide background information to your students on historical context, the early life of Fred Hampton, and a quick description of the Black Panthers. A secondary goal of these lessons is dispelling the false conception of the Black Panthers as a predominantly violent or even criminal organization. This first lesson uses 2 speeches by Hampton to help students discover what his most important beliefs about the civil rights movement were. The second speech highlights his belief that guns and responses to police violence were an important part of the civil rights movement. Students will likely contrast this with nonviolent approaches taken by other civil rights leaders. Use this as an opportunity to highlight that other civil rights groups, including those led by Martin Luther King Jr., were more radical than we often pretend looking back. The second lesson plan does look at how Fred Hampton was killed by police in an early morning raid after likely being drugged by an FBI informant. This lesson may be emotionally difficult for your students, so please check in with students occasionally and share your own emotions to normalize complicated responses to difficult history. Sadness and anger are completely normal reactions to learning that the police and the FBI likely conspired to assassinate a civil rights leader. Use this lesson as an opportunity to engage students and question the legitimacy of different historical documents and testimonies. Now, students may rightfully question how this could possibly happen in the United States and how more justice wasn't found for Hampton and the other Black Panthers. Depending on your comfort level in the classroom, this is a perfect opportunity to discuss systemic racism and how justice in a racist system can be extremely difficult to find. The third lesson dives into what exactly COINTELPRO, the FBI's counterintelligence program that the second lesson hints at, actually was. It takes the lens of the heist that revealed the program to the public and places students in the shoes of those individuals discovering this illegal program in secret documents. In our students' case, they will be looking at now declassified documents from the FBI describing actions taken against civil rights groups like the Black Panthers and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. This lesson is a jigsaw with groups of 4 students. Each student is provided a unique packet of 4 documents they need to summarize for their group. The activity culminates in each group writing the beginning of an email to newspapers revealing what they have learned and why it is important. Some students may lean into the game-ish or role-playing nature of this lesson, while others may take a more serious tone from being struck by the horrible reality of the actions of the FBI. Neither is a wrong approach to this lesson, but it may be worth sharing that there will likely be a variety of reactions to these documents before starting the lesson. It is important to note that one of the documents in this lesson is a note sent by the FBI blackmailing Martin Luther King Jr. with tapes of his infidelity. You do not want the takeaway from this lesson to be that MLK cheated on his wife. You can discuss with your students that even our heroes were human and made mistakes. The larger takeaway should be the cruelty and illegal nature of the FBI's actions. Additionally, many historians believe this letter to be demanding that King commit suicide. Though the letter does not explicitly state this, it may be difficult for some students to read about this. Personally, I think the history of this blackmail is important and worth including because it shows the lengths the FBI were willing to go to, that they attacked even Martin Luther King Jr., who we now hold up as a hero. I also see it as making King's fight for freedom even more impressive as we learn the forces he was fighting against within his own government. The fourth lesson asks students to consider how Fred Hampton could be memorialized so that more people can learn and remember his story. This class involves discussion of how we memorialize public figures and which methods students think would be most useful. The lesson uses a series of guided questions to help students think about how they want to present their memorial. Students need to use both their creativity to design and draw up a mock-up of their monument, and also access what they have learned this week to write an informational plaque to accompany their work. This week of lessons is meant to culminate in a whole class discussion period to synthesize what students have learned and experienced through the week. The discussion question I suggest is, what should the legacy of Fred Hampton be? The idea of this discussion is to engage students in considering how to balance the story of Hampton's life with the story of his death. Additionally, the complex perception of the Black Panthers and Hampton's role in uniting a diverse racial coalition in Chicago. Students can draw on their notes from his speeches, their understanding of the COINTELPRO program, and how they decided to memorialize Hampton last class. Encourage students to stick to primary documents and facts they have learned about Hampton. If through the course of the week a different, compelling question arises from your students, be flexible and make that your final discussion question. Other questions I considered were, was Fred Hampton lynched? And what can we learn about the Black Lives Matter movement from the life and death of Fred Hampton? Make the lessons your own and have a great learning experience with your students.